My journey towards exploring an inclusive church began in 2021 in the thin Plaice of Walsingham, a place of pilgrimage since the 11th century. How many people have experienced Walsingham? Yeah, beautiful, beautiful place. I'd thoroughly recommend it. Our pilgrimage group visited the wonderful medieval church of Lady St Mary in South Creek. And in the porch was a notice. Thank you, Hannah. And the notice affirmed membership and active participation of an organisation called Inclusive Church. We believe in inclusive church, a church which celebrates and affirms every person and does not discriminate. I wonder if I could have a show of hands, please. Firstly, of those who have heard of Inclusive Church. Brilliant, thank you. Can you keep your hands up if you are a member of Inclusive Church and your PCC has passed a resolution about being part of Inclusive Church? There's probably about 10, 15 people in the room. And actually, I looked up on the website how many people were members of Inclusive Church in Bristol, just as a kind of guide, and there were 13. So I don't know how many churches there are in Bristol, but that's a modest percentage, isn't it? Okay. So, going back to Holy Trinity Hallfield, when I got back to Bristol from Norfolk, I discussed with our leadership team putting together a proposal to go to the PCC to join Inclusive Church. And there was no hesitation to do that, no hesitation at all. So I took it to the next PCC and people said, great, this Inclusive Church sounds fantastic. But actually, do we really need to do this? Because we're all inclusive, right? So actually what happened was that we didn't join at that point, not because people didn't agree, but because they didn't think it was necessary. And I would contend that there is a bit of a disconnect between what we say we do internally and what we explicitly promote. And that exclusivity can be confusing and it's not welcoming. It's not necessarily intentional, but it's what happens in a group of people who perhaps have a shared language and a shared list of things that they need to get done. We're all busy in terms of our roles in the parishes, and maybe we don't always consider that outside, and I include myself in that. I actually interviewed someone who was new to our gathered community in Hallfield and asked them what it meant to know that we were a member of Inclusive Church. We need to be visible in our intentions, he said, from our websites to posters and banners, and this means from outside the building in. So if someone is approaching our building, it's no good just having our intent inside the building. I had someone who came into Holy Trinity a couple of weeks ago, and they did come into the building, and it was on a Saturday afternoon just before we were preparing for a baptism. And I gave them a leaflet, I told them a bit about the services, and the person said, do I need to dress up to come to church if I come tomorrow? That was a bit of a wake-up call for me, actually, because those questions people might be thinking about, but I'd not considered. So is being inclusive putting something on your website, and I know there are some churches that have done this, that says you don't need to dress up, come as you are? I think they're questions that we all need to consider really carefully. Taking an active and explicit intention forward We did pass the resolution the second time round after having a really good conversation and thinking prayerfully about our membership of Inclusive Church. So we appointed an Inclusion, Equality and Diversity lead, my lovely colleague Nick, who sits on the PCC. We adopted a policy, and I'm really happy to share that if anyone wants to get into contact with me. And I think this is the key point. We are challenged at each PCC meeting with 4 questions by Nick, our lead, who brings a richness from another tradition, in inverted commas, which is both refreshing and also it can be really, really challenging. So I think it's worth, if I've got time, Becky, just to read out the 4 questions. So the 4 questions that we are asked at every PCC meeting. Okay. How is information shared, especially if someone does not attend the large 10 a.m. Sunday Mass? How is information shared? How will someone, whether churched or unchurched, unused to an Anglo-Catholic style of worship, feel included in worship and in wider church life and activities? Thirdly, how are people invited to take part in church activities and church life? And finally, is the way Holy Trinity undertakes its activities likely to exclude local people? So those questions are asked at the beginning of each meeting we have, and I really do hope that they frame the conversations that we subsequently have. And that is at the heart of our discussions. So as I come to the end of what is inevitably a very brief talk, I want to look at some examples of how we are living inclusive church in Holy Trinity Hallfield since that visit to Norfolk in 2021. All of these are bound up in welcome. Welcoming guests from Ukraine to live in our church house. Being explicit about our commitment to welcoming people living with dementia and their families to our church. Being practical about things like digital poverty and people who want to sign up to help us with children, youth and families and going through the DBS and safeguarding process, sitting next to them with a laptop and helping them work through so that they can be part of our community. And the bottom middle, it may not be possible to read the words, but we are rebels for social justice. We have John Frost, a famous Chartist, buried in our churchyard, and we want to use that connection to shout about what we can do and invite people in. And we have a big project to reimagine our church hall so that we can offer more community-based activities. And a cool £1 million would be great if anyone's got one in their back pockets. Okay, so we want to keep in the spirit the momentum going. So we're planning next a living library event where people can share their lived experience in a safe and respectful environment. I ran one of these at the University of the West of England in the spring, and it was such an important experience, and one participant noted, "I felt accepted, and sharing my experience within this environment has given me more confidence to live more authentically." So, finally, I've considered briefly the 2 questions about how do we show our intent and how do we live it. To conclude, in the spirit, under your seats, you will find 2 pieces of paper, 2 coloured pieces of paper. Can you get those out, please? What one thing will you take back to your PCC to discuss as a result of not just this TED Talk, but anything you've seen already? What one thing will you take back, and then take that piece of paper back with you? And the second and final one is, what would you like the person next to you to pray about for you in terms of your church community? If you happen to be sat next to someone who's from the same church as you, find someone else that you could give the prayer to. Thank you so much.